On the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Kurt Larson, a personal injury lawyer who founded Safe and Sober Prom Night in 2004 in Springfield, Missouri. The program has evolved from an impaired driving focus to preventing substance misuse in all its forms. The program today is simply known as Safe and Sober and has reached over 1 million students in 41 states. And schools as far away as Kiev, Ukraine, and Queensland, Australia have downloaded their content. Hello, Kurt, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Hello, Steve. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about Safe and Sober, and thanks to Mid-America for the chance as well.
Well, it's good to see you. Kurt and I have known each other for a number of years, but we don't see each other very often. Every once in a while, I'll see him at an annual breakfast that he has to recognize Safe and Sober, and that's kind of when I caught up with him this year just to see if maybe he'd want to be a guest on the podcast. So grateful that you could be here. Always like to know how you got involved in this kind of stuff. So what was your path to the prevention work? You're a lawyer, but how did you get interested in doing prevention work?
Well, I think deep down I was a closet do-gooder long ago, and finally realized that about myself. I remember, it's kind of a strange story. I was practicing law. I was 10 years into my career maybe, and stumbled upon a kind of industry magazine that had a little publication, a little article about two lawyers in North Carolina that were doing something called Safe and Sober Prom Night. So reached out to them. They told me, we get that request a lot, and there's a real challenge to get in the public schools, and for people to think that trial lawyers don't have a personal mission just to market themselves. So good luck with that. And it's also a giant financial downstroke. You better be ready to spend $25,000 your first year if you want to do it the way we did it. So I put that in a file and put it away for about 10 years. And then I got married and had 2 stepkids, and suddenly realized my place as a stepfather. I needed to find that. My kids were at Glendale High School, and Thomas and Lindsay were challenged with the very challenge that most youth face, and that is peer pressure and the option to engage in experimenting with drugs and alcohol. So suddenly I realized my day job as a personal injury lawyer and the stories of representing the people whose lives have been flipped upside down had a purpose beyond the case that I was involved in as a lawyer. And I started going to schools where my kids were and embarrassed the hell out of them. But it made a good story.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. Know the facts. About 1 in 14 car crashes involves an underage drinking driver. Talk with teens about the dangers of driving under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. Impaired driving is entirely preventable. A link to a SAMHSA resource that gives you tips for talking to kids about drunk and drug-impaired driving is available in our show notes. So what you've started, and this is, 20 years you've been working at this Safe and Sober project. Let's unpack that a little bit. What exactly is Safe and Sober?
Thank you. It's evolved, of course. As you mentioned in the intro, Safe and Sober Prom Night was a very simple notion that on the prom night season, which historically is one of the deadliest times of the year for high school students to engage in alcohol consumption and drive. So I picked that night to ask kids to take a pledge to be drug and alcohol free. And it became kind of wildly successful in Southwest Missouri as a good idea. We have our project graduation that happens a month later, but nothing at prom night, when not only students make poor decisions, but their parents sometimes, have a liberal attitude about getting them a limo and treating them like young adults when they're not quite there. So that worked well. Although it really wasn't doing a lot of substantive prevention. It was one night, and I came to realize that the pledge, they interpreted, our little angels interpreted that as at midnight, all bets are off. So
they're so smart.
that's right. So, came to realize about 7 years into this that we got to do something more meaningful than that. And through a series of just good fortune, got a grant from the Missouri Department of Transportation and SAMHSA to do something bigger that lasts year round. And that's how we became Safe and Sober, dropped the prom night component, and expanded in depth and substance as well as in regional.
So when you talk about the original development of this, so Safe and Sober prom night, the kids were asked to kind of pledge to not drink and drive, not to drink that night. What exactly were you asking the students to do? Yes,
thank you. It was basically, I did this tour of Southwest Missouri. It became 35 schools, and I was
when were you doing your law practice?
Yeah, good point. It became 2 weeks. It's kind of funny you say that.
You went on a road show for a couple of weeks.
And there was times when I'd go to like 5 schools in one day, and I'd forget where I am. And, it brought to mind like rock and roll, people who go buses to different cities and probably mix that up.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I was at Hillcrest and, used the mascot of a different school. And it was just an awful start. Anyway, a 30-minute PowerPoint about people, because of alcohol, who've been killed or seriously injured because of decisions young people make when drinking. So the pledge was to protect each other, make a pledge to yourself, to your parents, and to your fellow students to avoid alcohol consumption on prom night. And we asked them to bring the pledge card home and have...
So the parents have some skin in the game.
Exactly right. And I'd like to think, and I know, that it created a dialogue at the house, too, about these things, and an opportunity for parents to start a conversation that maybe is hard for some folks to talk.
Yeah. So you mentioned in there that you might illustrate the dangers that happened. Were you able to tell stories from your practice, where these had been real life cases? Did you have people that actually were victims of a DUI incident? Were they able to kind of convey their story? Was there some depth and weight to that?
Yes, thank you. The PowerPoint started as just my cases, right? Because I had these ready-made cases that maybe had gone to trial. I have evidence, I have photographs, I have highway patrol investigation, and I could bring that to the auditorium so that the students would see this happens all the time in the Ozarks. Someone is really killed by a young person making terrible decisions. So a lot of it was victim focused, although just in kind of in immersing myself in the prevention community, I came to know from people smarter than me that we could broaden that message to the costs of a DWI and the implications of a conviction on your future employability and what it means to, be convicted, and, just education that might appeal to some students and not others. It wasn't all about victims. And that's part of how the evolution has continued today. We always have held on to the victim component because I think for me and for our students, they need to hear that it's real, and that helps bring it to light. But I think they also need to be treated like the young adults that they are, and they like to hear about the science of their brains and why they're uniquely physiologically different than the rest of us, and why drugs and alcohol affect them differently.
I've done prevention for a long time, and I've been in middle schools, elementary schools, high schools. I've run the gamut, been on college campuses a few times, and it's a tough audience. And for you to do this year in and year out, especially the way you kind of describe it in the early days, I mean, you're kind of going on the fly. You have your message or your mission, but to stand up there and deliver this with conviction and with passion when the audience may or may not be connecting with you shows that there's a connection to your passion for the prevention effort. But did you get some feedback from the students early on? Like, What sustained you to keep doing this? Were you getting comments from parents, from teachers, from the students themselves? Like, wow, I'm glad you did that, because I can't imagine that if it was crickets in the audience, so to speak, that you'd want to do this year after year after year. You had to start getting some return on the investment, so to speak. Was that there early on?
Oh, in the earliest days, I would say no. I remember my first presentation at Kickapoo High School, and they were talking during my emotional presentation about people I've represented, and it was painful. And the principal had to get up and help me to get their attention. So it definitely became something I had to learn how to reach students. But it did seem as if over time they would come down afterwards, thank me for speaking up, thank me for coming. Of course, parents absolutely were calling my office and saying, great work, keep it up. The administrators were saying it's so nice to have someone from outside of our school community come out and remind them that there's a world out there that loves them and wants them to survive high school. Yeah. So all of that was inspiring to me for sure.
Well, that takes a lot of tenacity, Kurt, to do that year in and year out, especially, like I said, it's a tough audience, and learning how to kind of navigate an adolescent audience. I mean, we're the adults. Why do we need to listen to you? And, you're like substitute teacher. No one wants to pay attention. It's that kind of thing. So learning to navigate that, I imagine, was pretty tricky. Now, you talked about, so originally Safe and Sober Prom Night, and then you kind of started to get some feedback and understanding that it could be more effective, and maybe it could be more efficient if you kind of expanded it a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about what that's kind of been like to go from a regional presence, like your Springfield and a few surrounding counties, to the state, and now you've got kind of a national audience in 41 different states? So kind of talk a little bit about how that transition or that evolution really began from a mom and pop shop to, a franchise, so to speak.
Yes. Well, we knew we had to somewhat kill the roadshow, right? Because Kurt couldn't be everywhere statewide and beyond. So we were really ahead of our time when we figured out that this presentation and the stories we want to tell can be studio created. And that's part of what that grant allowed us to do, is really invest in high quality studio made videos. And that's been the hallmark of our program, is compelling videos that tell about the victims, that tell about the science, that interview experts that we bring to the schools. And it also gave schools the flexibility to present our program in whatever fashion they might want to. Instead of, you remember the days of going to auditoriums, was the only way it was done. And right. Now, especially post-COVID and with security concerns.
I can imagine this program would have been sought after during the COVID experience, like the virtual kind of thing, hands off.
Exactly. I really felt like we beat the technology on that, and we were ready to transition and easily had a pipeline of ready-made stuff to send out. So that's most of how we were able to scale up and reach more schools, is make it something that they can, initially it was send flash drives to every school, because still today there's questionable technology, bandwidth and internet in some of our rural communities. So they still need flash drives, sadly, but we stream it. They can download it, and we give them the ability to be versatile. They can do modules if they want to do a drug module one day and an alcohol module the next, or just talk about the science of brain development in any given classroom or homeroom. They can do it. They can also have an auditorium full of students just the old-fashioned way. So.
Now, is there still a component of the don't drink and drive and around prom, or at all times? I mean, or is it more a prevention focus?
Yeah, I never thought this would work, but we went from a prom night pledge to a year-round lifestyle choice. Mm-hmm. And I say it wouldn't work because I figured the pledge rates would plummet and nobody would be interested in checking that box. But, it's still true today that there's this loud minority of students who experiment that drowns out what is really a majority of students who do the high road. And so I think seizing on that, we took a chance and evolved the pledge card itself to be one where they have options. So there's like 9 boxes on there now. We've added, in addition to the broad, would you please pledge a lifestyle, or at least until 21, the legal drinking age, not to drink alcohol, not to get in a car with someone who's been drinking, not to do illegal drugs or use prescriptions that aren't prescribed by you, smoking, just all of the vices that keep growing new heads. We keep those coming. So, and it's pretty impressive. It's not so important now what the pledge rate is at any given school, but in the early days we were measuring that, and we were still seeing 60 and 70 and 80% of a student body taking that pledge and meaning it. And it was really impressive.
Well, I think that's interesting because I think about like when I was an adolescent, I probably wouldn't have taken something like that serious. It probably would have never ended up in the school to begin with all those days ago. But it seems like knowing teens today, they like the opportunity to be a part of that decision-making process. They want to be included. Yes. And they don't want you to come in there and just show them the blood, guts, and gore like I'm scaring you. They want to know why you're telling me this. They want to have some substance to back up that just don't do it because I'm the adult and I told you so. So I can see that there's students out there that would really, gravitate towards saying, I pledge not to do this.
I think that's right. I think it makes it important to them, a decision they get to make or not. And, I think I've always thought that there's some cover to that as well. One more reason why you can say no. I took the pledge and I want to keep that commitment. So, it's still, it starts a conversation. Sometimes it's hard to start. So all of those reasons, I call it positive peer pressure. We're kind of reversing the tables on them, right? And encouraging them to encourage each other to take this pledge because they see others doing it.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Bob or Carolyn DuPont? And they do a project called One Choice.
I have heard of that program.
And that's kind of the same idea that they have. It's not temperance and never doing this. It's taking into consideration that what you're doing today can have lasting impacts on the way that you think, your future, the choices that you're making, and it's asking them to delay the use of a substance until their brain is more fully developed, if not completely, developed. And that's a harder stretch once it's legal and you're 21. Even if the brain science is 25 is really the ideal place to aim for. But I could see that if you have the right combination of information for the youth, that they're more apt to at least consider, well, I'll put this off until I'm a little older, hopefully till they're 21. But
yes,
the longer you can delay.
And, we always say they really can't see past the next weekend. But I don't think any of us really think too far ahead. We're, as adults, maybe we're better at planning and plotting. But, as far as our eventual demise, I don't think we spend a lot of time thinking about that. And to stop and say, yes, I'm going to take a little break and not think about partying for this period of my life.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine you kind of alluded to this, I think, from your perspective. Not only could one choice to do something like drink and drive have consequences if you're into an accident, but even the choice to use substances and not even having that kind of a dramatic outcome, it can have an impact if there's other legal consequences or health consequences that I don't think young minds really understand, such as yourself. If you would have had a felony and when you were in high school, it would have jeopardized your chance to be an attorney. I mean, I don't think they understand that, and helping them really see that, it sounds like fun and maybe some of your friends are doing it, but we certainly know not all of them are.
Yes.
But there are so many other things that can be impacted just because, we're just having fun. We're just teens.
Right.
And is that what by going year round, are you getting more at the heart of these choices can have brain consequences, health consequences, employment, college applications, all of that?
Right. Mental health, dealing with, the issues of the day that are stressing our students are so much different than they were when you and I were in school. And, drugs and alcohol, as you know, are not just a peer pressure driven thing anymore, but a way of students cope with the challenges they're facing and the fears and the anxiety. So all of that is part of what, this not just sober, but the safe part of our program.
Right.
And our message.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. A podcast is like a breakout session from your daily routine. It's a unique way to perk up your prevention efforts. We'd like to hear from you. Please send your comment, topic, or guest suggestion to midamericapttc@gmail.com. Is it just video that you're teaching from? Is there curriculum that goes along with it that a teacher then shares with the student, and they maybe have some kind of a measurement to say they're learning something here? Is there some knowledge gained out of this experience?
There is. We've come a long way with that. As far as what we're delivering to schools, I'll give you an example of what's in what we call the pledge box. It might be the flash drive with the videos that we've talked about. Stack of pledge cards, one for every student. Posters that are inspiring students to consider what they want to be in the future, and it's giving them yet another reason to think about whether they want to sidetrack their future. And then, as you said, school curriculum. We've had experts, folks who actually develop curriculum, step into our program, either serving on our board or just helping us to develop curriculum. So teaching aids after a video presentation for each module, if they want to just take, for example, fentanyl use and its implication. There's a question and answer segment. There's ready-made PowerPoints for teachers. I always think about the poor substitute. Post-COVID especially, we had an onslaught of the use of substitutes. And, they don't know they don't have a ready-made, classroom schedule. So this is something anyone could pick up and present to their students and have some real depth to what the learning part of it is. And then, we've had pre and post presentation surveys to measure whether students really are taking this information in and learning from it. And the answer is yes. They are coming out on the backside, having a greater understanding of the implications of drugs and alcohol on their minds, on their activities, on their well-being.
So is it just available in like a school setting? Like, do you have to be a high school that registers for it to have access to the program? Or what about, I'm thinking, what if I'm a homeschool?
Yeah, it's COVID taught us that lesson, actually, and brought it home when schools kind of fell apart during COVID. Those were our primary customers. Every year we start over on our recruitment of schools. And it became very easy to kind of have returning schools until COVID. And suddenly the faculty we knew left, and they didn't know what safe and sober was at certain schools that used to be anchor tenants and keep coming back. So we thought about what other folks needed safe and sober after school programs that the YMCA conducts, and the Boys and Girls Club, and Boy Scouts of America, and Girl Scouts. So those are all partners that we're now trying to collaborate with. I just spoke to a group of Scoutmasters the other night here in Springfield. And, part of the achieving the rank of life, if you know about Boy Scouts, one of the requirements in the handbook is they have to attend a drug and alcohol awareness program and demonstrate a knowledge of that. So, it's a ready-made fit for the scouting organization. And it's wonderful. I love the idea of having a new audience and other ways that we can reach out to our students who need them.
So if I sat down, let's say we started on Monday and I'm the teacher, and we were just going to go through the components of safe and sober, is it days? Is it hours? How much time would we have to set aside to go through the material that you have available?
Well, it could be as little as if you played the 20-minute full-on program, didn't break it into segments or modules, play a 20-minute program, hand out pledge cards, and we're done. You could do it all really within one classroom period. But, ideally you bring it back into your classroom throughout the year. We are constantly pumping out new content, new educational information beyond just the annual presentation of a 20 to 30 minute program. So you can use it throughout the year. You can use it in conjunction with other organizations that are bringing prevention into our schools. The school resources officers, for example, they're always looking for ways that they can bond with their students, and Safe and Sober gives them an opportunity to kind of make it their own and present it to them. So yeah, it's being used throughout the year. It still seems as if prom night and graduation are critical times when our high schools are utilizing it, but there's Red Ribbon Week, a tongue twister, and also a good time during the spring semester for middle schools to engage in a prevention effort.
So it could be available to school, scouting, big brothers, big sisters, those kind of things like that, or a boys and girls club, I guess is what I was thinking of. Yes. They register with you, so you're either reaching out to them or they find out about you. Is there a cost associated with engaging in this, or is that what some of your fundraising efforts cover, or how does that work?
That's yes. I think
it always comes down to dollars and cents.
It does, doesn't it? And we've floated the idea of how can we sell this program and actually support our nonprofit without having to solicit help from private fundraisers and grants. But we've always come back to giving it away, and I think that's part of the reason for our success, frankly, is schools can't afford it, and it's a fantastic program, particularly because it's free, and it's freely transferable, so we want people to not only let us give it to them, but then share it with other schools in their district or their region, and let it grow like wildfire. Much of our national growth is just organic, just people hearing about it, stumbling upon it on the internet. I don't know how Kiev, Ukraine, and Australia landed that in the classroom, and I hope the folks in Ukraine are still able to use it despite what's going on in that country. But yeah, it's taken on a life of its own, really, with very little effort on the national spread.
Well, that's got to feel pretty good, considering you were that guy that had the PowerPoint presentation and couldn't even command the audience.
Yeah, it's way bigger than
it's like
me,
herding
Steve.
cats. Yeah, that's wonderful. So I'm going to have to ask this. You've talked about you can measure some sort of an outcome, a pre and post test. Do you have anything that might address whether or not it's effective? A lot of times in prevention, we'll talk about evidence-based practices, and is there anything that you can point to that says we know that it's being reached, it's being effective? What do you have that's on the outcome or the research side of this?
Yeah, I wish I had the magic, the unicorn in the room, as sometimes they say in the prevention world. It's a really hard one to prove, and there's just so many variables that can control whether any given school really seizes the program. If they've had a loss of a student that particular year or a catastrophe in their community, that can raise the level of awareness and explain behavioral changes. So as much as I'd like to take credit for all good things that happen, for example, we didn't have any deaths at prom night in any particular year. We'd love to say that's all because of Safe and Sober. But it's just, I have found I can't defend that position that we are changing behavior. I know in my heart. So the way we have always measured it just is from the educational perspective. And are they learning something from us? And is that useful and important? And it is. It certainly is information that they need. So we're good. That's good enough for us, and it seems to be good enough for our sponsors.
Well, now I know that you're part of the video presentation. Do you have other people that doctors, nurses, superintendents, principals, are they part of this that help deliver the content? You've talked about producing videos. Are they? Yeah. Do they have some skin in the game also from that perspective?
Yeah, goodness, yes. If it was just a boring attorney, no one would watch it. So we do. We have, locally, for example, the Greene County Medical Society's always been involved with this, and they readily make folks available for us to interview, not only for substantive content that can enhance our message, but so the students can meet these people who've made it their life to, to take care of folks, young people, pediatricians, neurologists, We interview highway patrol troopers all the time, local police. All the natural sciences play a part of the dynamic and keeps it interesting for our students.
Now, are you producing new content all the time, or is it kind of...
Yeah, all the time. For many years, we hired outside studios to produce our content, which was great, but we finally woke up and realized if we just had someone in-house full-time, which we have now. Nathan Springer is our content coordinator, I think is his technical name, but I call him the creator. And Nathan is just that. He is nothing like me, right? I'm type A and nerdy, and I have folders for everything and everything its place. And he's this creative guy who lurks in his office with the lights off and makes incredible videos, and is ready at a moment's notice to go wherever the story is. So if a child has overdosed on fentanyl in Nebraska, in theory, he can get on a plane and go capture that story for Safe and Sober. So it's cool.
Well, that's really great.
Yes, it is. And we have a studio in-house now, so he does all of his editing right there. It's pretty amazing.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Safe and Sober provides an innovative way to combat substance misuse through a free program which features prevention-focused videos and curriculum that are used by schools, homeschooled groups, and community organizations. Safe and Sober uses engaging and educational content to encourage dialogue and preventative action between youth, educators, and parents. To learn more, visit safeandsober.org. So the program is Safe and Sober, and we'll put links in the show notes so people can get connected to your website. You're also on Facebook and Instagram,
True.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
So before we get away from one another, is there anything that we haven't talked about from the perspective of Safe and Sober? Or I always sometimes say, this is your chance to be the sage on the stage. Is there something that you want the audience to think, say, or do now that we've talked about the Safe and Sober program?
Well, I think, yes, thank
or
you.
Prevention.
A couple of things come to mind. I think we all need to recognize our ability to influence young people in their decision-making, whether it's a child of your own or someone else's son or daughter or your grandchildren. They're watching us. Just when you think it's only the influencers on the internet that are of interest to them, they're paying attention to parents and grandparents. And as I'm now a grandparent of 4, I too realize that I have a real stake in helping these 4 to get through life without mistakes that could kill them or really sidetrack their dreams. So there's that. Everybody has a hand in this. And then there's just, for me, I've had a number of close friends and family who've fallen into the trap of drug and alcohol use. And we are slowly evolving to have a greater empathy for folks who have struggled with recovery. And I hope that Safe and Sober will continue to evolve with a message of understanding that happens to some of us, and it's not doesn't make us bad people. I believe in the disease concept of this problem, this epidemic problem, where good people can fall into the trap of addiction and not want to be there and didn't choose that, but it chose them. And we need to, in this country, at all levels, figure out a way to look at those folks different and understand and help them. So, especially in my profession, we have a major problem with drugs and alcohol, mostly because it's stressful and intense, and we're always solving everyone else's problems. And then we measure each other by the size of our verdicts and our success, and we can't let on that we may have something else going on that we need to talk about. So I'm trying the best I can beyond Safe and Sober, but even within my profession, to talk about how we need more empathy. We have a huge empathy deficit in this country. So thanks for giving me a minute to wax eloquent on that.
My guest on this episode has been Kurt Larson. You'll be able to find links to connect with him in our show notes. Once again, Kurt, thanks for being here.
been my pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.